Welcome to Winning Wednesdays with Pear VC. At Pear, we've been fueling the next generation of tech startups for 10 years. Working closely with founders since the beginning of their journeys, we've seen again and again that a good product isn't enough to build a meaningful business. You must also have a winning strategy and go to market.
Enter Winning Wednesdays with Pear VC, a monthly webinar series on GTM topics with actionable insights for founders and teams building from 0 to 1. Our webinars are broken up in two parts. Part one will be a short presentation from our guest with GTM expertise. And two will be a lively Q&A, which you're more than welcome to ask questions live. And we're your hosts, Pear GTM team, Pepe and Ana.
And today we're thrilled to have Sandy Mangat with us, who will walk us through early stage marketing 101. Sandy almost needs no introduction. I feel like we all are super mega fans of her. She's the head of marketing at Pocus, which is an AI native prospecting platform. Pocus has built hundreds of always-on AI agents to do the manual, tedious work of researching and prospecting so that reps can focus on selling. Sandy has almost a decade of experience in marketing, and she's a seasoned expert in building go-to-market, 0 to 1, community-led growth, product marketing, and PLG. And as I've told many of you, I feel like she's written the modern playbook on PLG. She has helped Pocus establish itself as a disruptive brand in sales tech through a growing and engaged community of over 3,500 members. We're so excited to hear from you, Sandy. I feel like this is going to be a session full of gems. So, folks, get ready to take copious notes, and please feel free to turn on your cameras and engage with Sandy as she presents. And then, as Pepe mentioned, we will take questions from you when we jump into the Q&A. So, without further ado, Sandy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anna and Pepe, and thank you so much for having me. This was really exciting, actually. I was just saying to Anna and Pepe that I, in the last decade, have never really sat down and thought about what advice I would give other folks who are building go-to-market 0 to 1 or early stage. I have a lot of these conversations, but I've never put pen to paper to really distill all of that advice. So really appreciate y'all for the opportunity and excited to chat with all of you during the Q&A portion. Like Anna said, please, add your questions as they come up as I'm presenting, and we'll talk about that all at the end. So I'm just going to share my screen. We'll speed through some slides here, and then really excited to get into your questions. So, like I said, haven't ever had the opportunity to distill down all of my advice. So I tried to focus on 4 key principles to winning early stage marketing for all of you today. Appreciate you, Anna, for that lovely introduction, but just a little bit more. I've been a startup junkie, so I've mostly worked in startups for the last 10 years. And specifically, I've worked at a lot of companies that haven't had a ton of resources. I've worked for a lot of Canadian startups who don't get, blockbuster funding rounds. So I think that's given me a healthy philosophy on how to spend resources and be scrappy when it comes to building a marketing strategy. I've also, as a result, become, a total generalist. I love to dabble in everything go-to-market. But my background, I definitely spike mostly in product marketing and brand. I like to say I cosplay as a demand gen growth marketer, but certainly there are a lot of other people who are super smart that I admire in that space. But when you're in early stage, you kind of have to learn how to do everything. I joined Pocus as the first go-to-market hire, which was a bold choice by Alexa, our founder, to hire a marketer first before we even really had a product or customers. But right now, we are a Series A company where actually this team size is wrong. We're almost 30 people. Marketing and sales is a team of 6. Yeah, we're super excited to grow this year. So it's a little bit about me. Today, I'm going to cover 4 key principles to winning early stage marketing. And I'll go through each of these, and you can see that some of them are a little tongue in cheek. And it's a mix of what's worked for Pocus, what I've seen work in other roles, And it's also a mix of kind of strategic advice as well as how to think about the mindset you need to win in early stage marketing. So one of my favorite things to say at Pocus is everything is easier when you're famous. And when thinking about early stage marketing, you need to have this in the back of your mind. And this is essentially the adage I go back to when thinking about the importance of brand and creating authority. So, in the early days of building your marketing strategy, your goal is to build an audience of your ICP, and then you need to become an authority for that audience. And so this is why at Pocus, we focus very heavily on founder-led brand and thought leadership in the early days. We realized that we were entering already a pretty noisy category of sales tech. There's a lot of voices, and it's hard to break through if you do not have a very clear narrative or something to say. So I think having an authoritative voice on something is critical to success in early stage marketing. So what does that actually mean for you? It's about sitting with the founding team, if you're a marketer or as a founder, thinking about what is the narrative. So not product messaging, but really like what is the grand narrative I'm telling here? Who is the villain of my story? Who is the hero of my story? What is the thing that I'm fighting against? Is it an old world, new world? Is it a 10x better way to do things? Just figuring out what the narrative arc is for your company and for your product is going to be the first step in starting to think about how to build authority in a space. And then you need to think about what are the gaps that currently exist in the content landscape? What are people not talking about? What are you hearing from customer conversations? What are the things that they want to talk about, and start to build a content strategy around that? And then it's about going and picking the right channels to go and amplify that message, and just amplify it until you're blue in the face. You just have to consistently beat the drum, with this goal of trying to make yourself, your brand, your company, your product famous. How can I get in front of as many eyeballs? So the ways that we did this at Pocus was community AMAs. We picked this one program of actually amplifying experts' voices and then being the curator and synthesizer of the advice and best practices that we heard from those experts, and kind of borrowing their audience temporarily to help build our own audience, and also borrowing their expertise and authority to eventually create our own expertise and authority in a space. So that's what we did with Pocus's product-led sales AMAs. This was a new area for a lot of go-to-market teams exploring both PLG and sales. There were a lot of questions. We were getting a lot of questions in sales conversations, and a lot of folks were kind of needing expertise, best practices, frameworks, advice. And so another piece of advice I have on your journey to becoming famous is try and create these rituals like a community AMA, something that you can hang your hat on. And then also think about coining terms, thinking about frameworks. If you yourself are not an expert, you can always provide value and expertise by being the best synthesizer of information. Folks love frameworks. That type of content does really well, especially on LinkedIn. And becoming known for a term or being known for a framework is going to help you on that journey to be seen as an authority and in quote unquote becoming famous. And then the last thing I'll say on this topic is getting on stages. So in the early days, your stage is tiny. And so you need to invest in making your stage bigger. So whether your stage is a podcast or AMAs like we did, or a webinar or something else. But in the meantime, to continue to build and grow your audience, you need to go on a podcast tour. So in the early days of Pocus, we basically said yes to everything. And I would recommend you do the same. Obviously, think about ICPs a little bit. Like, does this person who's inviting me on their podcast, or who I'm pitching to be on their podcast, does their audience match up with the audience I want? But even if there's just slight overlap in the early days, I would say yes to everything because nobody knows you. You're not famous yet. You kind of have to climb that ladder in order to become famous. And then eventually the stages you get invited on continue to get bigger and bigger. Um, so let me dive in a little bit into this community content and customer flywheel that we built at Pocus in the early days. And it all started with this product-led sales AMA series. So like I said, we were trying to build the category of product-led sales. There were already some folks who were doing product-led sales, but they didn't call it that. So there were experts that existed. And so our entire goal was we want to meet these experts. One, because they're going to have helpful advice for other people in our community. But also we might want to sell to these experts. Their companies are, within our ICP, or at the very least, they could become great referral sources. How can we build a relationship with these folks so that they trust us and they may recommend Pocus in the future? So quite literally, Alexa and I put together a list of dream guests for the AMAs that were within our ICP, and we just went cold, outbound, trying to get them to come on the podcast. And the first time we did this, it was quite difficult. Like trying to get people to do it was a lot harder. So we had to lean on where we had the warmest intros through our investor network, through customer referrals, just people vouching for us essentially. And then each subsequent season has gotten easier. In the last round of season 3 of the podcast, we sent out 12 invites for people to be guests, CROs of really awesome companies. Like we had Stevie Case from Vanta recently. We got a 90% accept rate. So it's all about kind of building that first season is going to be walking through glass. But then once you have well-known, recognizable names, people are going to continue to come. So back to the flywheel. We get guests, then we get guests to promote the AMA with their audience. So this goes back to that audience expansion. You need to borrow somebody else's audience in order to grow your own. So really lean on guests to promote heavily to their pre-existing audience. And actually in the early days, we focused on folks who already had a bit of a following for that reason, so that we could capture some of their audience. Then I would turn every AMA recording into written social content for both our blog and our newsletter. As the solo marketer, that made my life a lot easier. And then obviously we started driving inbound leads from social as a result. You see us associated with a go-to-market expert on LinkedIn talking about their frameworks. It piques your interest. You go to our website and then request a demo or some other converting action. And then eventually, these people end up either requesting a demo or in our community, and then we continue nurturing those relationships until some of them become customers. So you can see how this one program, this one asset of a product-led sales AMA continues to deliver value for Pocus over time. And my advice to you is to think about what flywheels can you create in the early days that are going to be kind of give you that multiplier effect of one bit of effort turns into, multiple pieces of content, more touch points with potential customers, and again, building up your audience and your authority, because as we know, everything is easier when you're famous. The other key piece of everything is easier when you're famous and building all of this content is we focused on helping rather than selling. So your goal is to become famous, not to sell your product to every single person. And I think that's really important to keep in mind as you're building your marketing strategy and balancing help versus sell. I still to this day, have a lot of my marketing budget and strategy focused on just being helpful, educational content, answering questions, just becoming a go-to resource for my ICP, and getting them to love our content, love us enough that when they do eventually get into an evaluation, they will think about Pocus first. And so you kind of have to play this long game, especially as an early stage marketer. So don't try and I would even recommend that you're not going hard on selling in the first 6 months. Um, Focus more on building an audience and building authority before you go and hit people up to buy your product. You're probably going to have a much better conversion rate if you're nurturing first. Um, in my first year at Pocus, my OKR was simply cult following. And I think that that really drove all of my decision making when it came to how I thought about my budget, my programs. My main goal was just make Pocus the #1 destination for content on product-led sales and do things before anyone else did. So like get to the coining of the terms first, like coin the frameworks, try and get really helpful content out there first. And these are some of the results, the we got a lot of inbound messages praising our content. People were thinking of our PLS playbook every day. Somebody even started a book club. So it was really a great validation that focusing on helping rather than selling was an effective way to build this audience and authority and eventually build pipeline too. Okay. Second piece of advice, always be launching. So when you're thinking about your early stage marketing, you need to just like have a marketing moment every month. One marketing moment per month is my recommendation because you get a spike of traffic and a spike of leads and a spike of interest. And if you just continue to do that, it has compounding effects. You'll see every spike continue to get bigger and bigger. So thinking about whether that's a content launch, a product launch, just think about what is that marketing moment that you're going to create once a month. And this is also a good way to not do too much either. Like think about this one thing that you can do every month. In addition to that, I recommend having one big bet per quarter. So thinking about kind of what is the one really big piece of content, really big product launch that I'm going to do a fully integrated marketing campaign around, to again optimize your own resources and make the most of one program rather than kind of like focusing on a million different things. And then when thinking about launches, always think distribution first. So how am I going to get this launch in front of the right people? And in the early days, it's all about reverse engineering the distribution. So people aren't going to necessarily just volunteer to help you. They're not going to share your post. You're not going to go viral just because your content is amazing. Unfortunately, LinkedIn doesn't work like that. A lot of platforms don't work like that. You're going to have to reverse engineer it. So tap into your network, activate them, get them excited about this launch 2 weeks ahead of time, and then define who's going to comment, who's going to share, who's going to email it out to their network. So there's a lot of just unscalable stuff that you have to do in the early days to reverse engineer the hype. And then eventually the hype starts rolling in organically. But even to this day, we do some level of reverse engineering of hype on launches, just because it's going to make it that much better for you. I would say it's a lot easier to launch things when you're focusing on unique content as well. So do you have proprietary data that you can share? Can you run a survey and do a benchmark report? What is it that you can uniquely offer as part of this launch? And then also, again, back to like borrowing somebody else's audience, finding co-marketing partners, even if they're just adjacent to you. Maybe they're complementary tools, super helpful in making every launch that much more impactful. I get the most mileage out of every launch by thinking in campaigns. So like I create this matrix of what's my theme, and then I think about content that rolls up into that theme, in-person events, digital events, PR, product launches. So thinking about all of the different channels and programs that you have, but having a central theme as part of your campaign, like net dollar retention, expansion, for us, prospecting, helps organize all of these launches. And then from a very tactical standpoint, I think being very organized with how you think about launches is extremely important. So I have a template that I just rinse and repeat every time that has my launch strategy. I include messaging, this framework called GAC, which is from MKT1, Emily Kramer. where you define your goals, your audience, your channels, and your creative. And then, of course, having a full project tracker in Notion. All of this is going to just make the launching process, if you're doing it monthly, that much easier. So you can just rinse and repeat. Okay. Getting a little bit into more of the mindset I think you need to have in order to win in early stage marketing. We have this value at Pocus that we call shipperate, which stands for ship and iterate. And I think the thing that's different for early stage versus you are a later stage company is time. You just are time poor. You got to get things done a lot faster. And so you often don't have the luxury to have a quarter long project where you're thinking about making it perfect. I really believe in setting unrealistic deadlines for yourself and just trying to time box things as much as possible. What can I get done in an hour, in 30 minutes, in a week? If I think my first thought is this campaign, I'm going to launch it in 2 weeks, I'll say, can I launch it in 1 week? What am I going to have to trade off in order to launch it in 1 week? And sometimes you realize that the trade-offs that you're making are on things that wouldn't have that much impact anyways. Like if I waited another week, I would get a slightly better graphic. Or if I waited a week, I would get maybe 20 more signups. Is that juice worth the squeeze? So I think really optimizing for shipping fast, learning, and then iterating is important. And you can do this by making it, a value that you have the entire team a part of. So we've done team-wide kind of shipperation sprints. And we reward shipperation as well as part of our weekly all hands. We give out value awards, and if people are shipping quickly and getting great results, we publicly will celebrate the shipperation. To that effect, we also track weekly experiments and really share the learnings in public channels as well. So everyone kind of gets into this shipperation spirit. This is an example of some team-wide sprints that we've done. So we did Shipmas to celebrate end of year shipping. I did like a shipping kind of challenge with my team around Thanksgiving. We called it Shipsgiving. We created a full board of ideas that we wanted to execute on. Across like creating net new things, improving existing workflows, just like gardening, trying to improve all the like little things as part of the marketing mix. And then we would just pick items from the board and check it off every day. And it was a fun thing to do as a team to get into this shipperation mindset. What I found is early stage teams that are the most effective are the ones that are shipping things quickly and learning fast, and being unafraid to fail. So do not get stuck in analysis paralysis. Just get stuff out there. Okay. Last piece of advice before we jump into some questions. I would encourage you all to play your own game and play a big game, which counterintuitive, like early stage marketing, you feel like the little guy, you feel like you can't make big swings because you don't have huge budgets, you don't have an audience, you may not know anybody. But I think that's actually exactly why you should make big swings. The worst someone's going to do is tell you no. But I think part of being an early stage is having a relentless mindset and being a little maybe delusionally optimistic about what you can achieve. And then sometimes things just work. You just have to, shoot your shot. So we definitely embody that at Pocus, and I think that's why we've been successful in many regards. Is especially Alexa, our founder, she encourages this. We're always focusing on like, what are some big goals that we can set? What are some big bets we can take, some big swings we can make? And then we hustle to try and make them happen, whether it's hustling to get intros to really senior people at our ICP accounts, or, maybe hustling to get invited to an event where we know our ICP is going to be. We also focus on doing what the big guys can. So our competitors, if you're in a space with incumbents, think about what are some things that they may not do because of brand risk, and then do them because you don't have any brand risk yet. And that's kind of amazing. Um, and then last advice is you need to play your own game, but don't reinvent the wheel. Like find unique things that you can do, but don't go so unique on some stuff that you're wasting cycles like reinventing the wheel on some tried and true things. And so my advice here is copy frameworks, but not somebody else's playbook. Like there are frameworks for how you should do growth, there are frameworks for how you should think about messaging, product marketing, narrative building. So utilize those frameworks, but do not just copy and paste somebody else's tactics. Think about what is going to be unique for you, your audience, what can you uniquely offer. So think about like what natural advantages do you have? For example, at Pocus, the reason why we're so content and community heavy is that's my strength. So I just leaned into my strength. Uh, Content writing, connecting people, learning from others. And and that's why we were able to ship things so quickly. So think about your advantages and then lean into those to play your own game. Some examples of the risks and scrappiness and uniqueness that we do at Pocus. We have a fun brand. We really leaned into that because we knew that more established brands weren't going to do that in our space in sales tech. Also at the time, a lot of the brands that were, it's like everyone had like a blue and white logo. No one was having fun with it. So we definitely zigged when everyone zagged and just had a lot of fun with the Pocus brand. We launched kooky things like Zodiac qualified leads as like a fun little campaign. And speaking of big swings, Stevie was on our podcast yesterday, and that's just because we thought we would cold DM her one time. And you just never know who's going to say yes to you. So take that risk, take the big swing, be scrappy, be unique. That's it.
Amazing. I have to just comment on that screenshot how even the use of the purple heart to Stevie's reply, it's like so on brand. It's amazing. It's so good. Wow, Sandy, that was phenomenal and so packed with insights. I was taking notes as well. Folks, this is where it gets really fun and specific to you. So we want to welcome everyone in the audience to participate in Q&A now. I'm sure many of you have questions. We've actually received a number of questions in the registration form. So I can start with a few of those, but really want to invite the audience to participate. So get ready, folks. Sandy, one question that we get all the time is about the minimum viable tech stack. When you're doing early stage marketing, what is the minimum, even if you can just share the tools that you would use or the tools that you did use at Pocus for assessing what's working, what's not, or just operating in those early days?
Yeah. I think a lot of this will depend on what channels you're going to choose to prioritize for sure. So I know that's never a satisfying answer at the beginning. It depends on what your strategy is, but I think there are some things that are universal. So tracking, from day one is super important. So make sure that your website has Google Analytics or whatever you're using, something just like have something to track. Google Analytics, I think, is like the best option in early stage. Have some sort of marketing automation, email marketing automation. We use HubSpot, and honestly, I really recommend HubSpot if you're early stage because you can also then use it as your CRM in the early days before you're ready for something a little more heavyweight like Salesforce. That's definitely an area I don't think reinvent the wheel at all. Just get one very easy to use tool. HubSpot can basically do almost everything that you want it to do. So GA, HubSpot. And then I think the last one is going to be a little dependent on the programs that you're prioritizing, but for us, we were doing a lot of content, we were doing a lot of community events. We didn't really have a ton of specialized tools for a while there, but the one I invested in was a platform called Luma for hosting our virtual events. And it just made the registration process a lot easier, sends calendar invites. It was great. We've since switched, and well, not switched. We now also use another webinar platform called Sequel, but in the early days, we use Zoom and we use Luma to host all of our events. And that was our minimum viable tech stack.
Amazing. That question's asked all the time, so that totally makes sense and is great to know. Another question that we get a ton is about prioritizing, and it seems like you've already touched on this in your presentation, but um, I think I already know the answer is that if you just prioritize by big swings, like how do you know ahead of running a campaign or doing something that it's going to make a big splash? I guess like assessing that and knowing which big swing to take.
Yeah. I think when thinking about a big bet, your assumption has to be that because I'm making this my big bet, I'm going to do everything possible to make it incredible and make it work. Um, and obviously, you're choosing it as your big bet because you have a specific hypothesis around why it will work, and what metrics you're going to be able to impact. But it always starts with like, what are your company goals? And then breaking that down into like quarterly, what do I need to do in order to help hit those goals? So for me, gold in the early days, more on I would say like softer OKRs around cult following and I think my OKR was product-led sales equals Pocus, Pocus equals product-led sales. That was my OKR. And then the ways I was measuring that was, are we getting mentioned in market maps? Are like analysts talking about us? And so orienting my marketing moments and big bets around trying to, get to that outcome. Now I'm totally focused on pipeline. So all of my focus is like, how am I going to achieve XYZ in pipeline this quarter? And then I have a series of things I know that work. And then I have some just big bets that I don't know that they're going to work, but because I'm making them my big bet, it is my mission to make them work. But it's okay if they fall short of my goals. But my objective with a big bet is just to set an audacious goal and then try and do everything possible to make it happen. And then if you don't hit it, you don't hit it. You're still going to learn a ton.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, we have our first audience question. Sapide, go ahead and unmute.
Hi Anna. Hi Sandy. Thank you so much for the presentation. You learned a lot. So I have three questions. The first one is about how did you start the podcast? Who were the first guests, and how did you get them to come to the podcast? And my second question is about the cold email, like you said earlier at the beginning, and what was it actually, if you're able to share? And my third question is about, can you share a story of one of your campaigns and how did it fold out so that we can map out the tactics that you mentioned in a story? Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So the first one was how do we get started with the podcast? And how do we get those first initial guests? So the first few guests were just people who were friendlies, like people we knew would say yes. So I think our very first AMA was with our seed investor Mecca from First Round. So getting somebody in your network for the first one, two, or three is great. And then you can leverage their brand to get the next three, four, five. So in subsequent emails that we sent to try and get people to come on the podcast, we said, hey, we're starting a podcast. We've already recorded, we're starting an AMA series. We've already recorded sessions with Mecca and whoever else we had on. And so just that name recognition. And then we specifically targeted people that would know Mecca and some of our other guests. So you can't just like go to a whole random cohort of people and say, these are the people we've had on. So think about kind of like almost like the circles, right? Like there's like the center of the circle is your network. So start there and find the people who are the most interesting and have something interesting to say out of your network. And then think about the circles around that. Who do they know? And then who does, it just keeps on going. So, The cold message is something pretty simple. It was just explaining our mission with the AMAs and talking a little bit about Pocus and what we were building, and then saying, we've already started building this community. There was definitely a lot of flattery in those outbound emails. So why are you excited to bring this person on? What do you think that they have to offer? And then we were actually pretty, I think, specific with the types of questions that we wanted them to answer in the AMA. So saying, hey, we're getting a lot of questions from our community about X, Y, and Z. You are incredible at X, Y, and Z. And then give an example of why you think they're incredible, point to something that they've done in their career, and then make the ask. Um, I am so sorry. What were the other two questions?
These are the two questions. My third question was, can you share a story of one of your launches, marketing launches, and how it rolled out, all the tactics that you mentioned in that story, if it's possible?
Yeah. I'll try and do the abridged version. So, because I think we could talk about launches on a whole other separate session. But I think the important thing about so one of the most recent launches, we launched Pocus AI, and we kind of took a campaign approach where we were doing multiple activations to launch Pocus AI, which was a kind of new product launch, in multiple different channels. And so I started with what are my goals? And there was twofold on that. It was brand awareness and recognition for this slight pivot that we were making in our positioning. So Pocus had been historically focused on product-led sales and PLG companies, and this was an expansion of our ICP and also an expansion of what our product could do. So I had a goal of repositioning and kind of like brand awareness around the repositioning. And then I had some hard metrics that I was trying to hit from a outcome perspective in terms of demos and pipeline generated. And so then that's also how I broke down the programs as part of this launch was which programs are focused on brand awareness, which programs are focused explicitly on pipe generation. So we hosted a couple of events, and then we also went to a few conferences where we were kind of unveiling this new positioning. And so those I measured based on pipeline in the room, pipeline generated, and then obviously thinking about how many meetings and conversions we got after those events. And then for the more brand awareness side of things, it was, did we see a spike in website visits? Did we see an increase in impressions on our founder social posts, increased engagement? And then any increase in mentions of Pocus on AI market maps. So that's kind of how I thought about it at a high level. And happy to, take more of the detailed conversation offline.
Thank you for those great questions. We have another question from Jade, so I'm going to bring her onto the stage here.
Oh, there's a stage.
Yeah,
Hi,
welcome.
Sandy. Thank you so much. This was so incredibly helpful. I know Pocus was kind of a rare case where you were hired before they had a product. But my question is really, do you have any advice for founders in terms of when is the right time to bring on their first marketing hire? Are there any things that need to be true before then? Because we're actually going through this process right now, so that would be super helpful.
Yeah. I think maybe I can ask you some questions actually. So it really depends on what your market looks like and yeah, the dynamics of the market. So are you in a really crowded category? Are you doing category creation? Which one of those is it?
We are in an established category, so there's definitely sort of existing incumbents, as well as newer players. Yeah.
Okay. And then how what are you thinking in terms of the go-to-market motion today? Do you think it's going to be focused on PLG model? Do you think it'll be more sales-led?
So we're a consumer product.
Okay.
So primarily PLG, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in that case, like thinking about marketing earlier is probably better.
Mhm.
Um, Pocus is a rare case where, despite being a very sales-led company, Alexa chose to hire marketing early, and that's because we were doing category creation. So if you're doing any
Yeah.
level of category creation, I think hiring a marketer very early is beneficial. If
Yeah.
you're more of a sales-led company, you should hire marketing probably after you've kind of gotten the first few customers under your belt. You have an understanding of the sales process and product market fit. But for consumer and BLG, I think hiring marketing early just to start experimenting with
Yeah.
scaled programs is going to be important.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. Hopefully we can find someone like you.
Yeah,
Thank-
maybe that's, I mean, just to tag on to that, how any advice on finding a solid first marketing hire that you could add?
Yeah, I think, some of the softer skills are something I would prioritize of, are they going to be just kind of focused on shipping and executing? You do not want your first marketing hire to be strategy up here. You need somebody who's like very willing to get into the weeds. Ideally, you get both. You have somebody who can flex both on the strategic side of things and on the execution. Um, it's definitely hard to find, but lots of people out there exist. Um, I, and depending on your market, I think for you, Jade, it sounds like having somebody with a growth marketing background would probably be helpful in PLG. But if you're not PLG, I would say product marketing is always a good place to start, because product marketers have that strategy background, but often you'll find really good scrappy product marketers who can dabble in content marketing, who can dabble in community. And so, yeah, I think just somebody who is really generalist, hungry, willing to be scrappy and hustle are some of the qualities I would look for. High agency, and yeah, just making sure that they have both the skill and the will to walk through glass in the early days.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Great question, Jade. Thank you. Sandy, I have to ask, with your focus on content and that being like one of the strengths that you said that was clear, and you kind of play to that strength, and with AI and the way it's just I don't know, creating waves in almost every part of the work that we do. Um, what do you think the future of content marketing is? Do you think it's just like we're just going to see a lot of noise and it's just going to get really messy? I'm just curious your thoughts specifically, because that's an area that where you really spike.
Yeah, great question. And I think this is why it's so important to focus on, your narrative and where you can have authority on a topic. Um, there's like content marketing that's for growth purposes of SEO. And I think, we've seen the news recently of AI content flooding the market and making that less valuable. So in a world where that happens, and then you have a world where there's so much AI generated junk basically on the internet, makes it really hard for your buyers to sift through the noise. So having a very clear narrative and valuable content that's, in whatever format, long form written, long form video, short form video, whatever it is, I think having super unique content, it's going to get even more valuable. So having something differentiated to say is the basis of that. So you can't have that content strategy without first thinking about what your differentiated narrative and message is, and how you're going to kind of speak on that topic with authority.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that your position is it's going to get more valuable, right? Rather than like content's
Yeah.
going to become this big jumble. I agree with that. Okay, I have a few other questions. So audience, we're getting close to the end here. If no one else has questions, I have a couple more that I want to get through, Sandy. One that I loved that was submitted from the audience is, what was your most useful early marketing failure at Pocus? And maybe you can walk us through that story, something that didn't work that maybe redirected you, or gave you, significant learnings that you applied, in response to it. Anything that you might share there?
I don't know if this is like the most useful one, but it is the one that popped up in my brain first, so I'm just gonna say it. It's also something that happened in the very early days. And it taught me a few things. So I made my founder, Alexa, wake up at like 5 a.m. her time to go on this virtual conference stage for this like PLG conference, which we thought was going to be amazing and have a lot of relevant ICP attending. Ended up being like a very irrelevant audience. Not that many people showed up, and like the actual conference organizers were not great to work with. So it was a poor experience overall. And so Alexa obviously was not happy about waking up at 5 a.m. for something that was not super valuable use of her time. And so I learned a few things there. One was just, you know, vetting your opportunities a lot closer, really asking some key questions in an email upfront. I don't even meet with anybody now unless you can tell me the ICP that's going to show up. How are you getting that ICP there? And like, what level of guarantee are you going to give me that they're going to show up? And then kind of like, what's the process look like for repurposing that content? Are you recording it? Are you going to give me the recording? Am I getting a lead list? So just, you know, getting those details firmed up ahead of time and not just jumping at stuff. Kind of counter to the advice I gave of like, say yes to everything and get on every stage. Actually do just those three questions in an email is like such an easy thing to do, and you'll never have to worry about sending your founder on a terrible virtual conference. Even if it looks like they booked a lot of great guests and it seems amazing, you know, trust but verify.
Yeah. That's so good. And it seems like, yeah, like the natural graduation point to the earlier advice, which is
Yeah.
just say yes to everything. Okay, last, I have two other questions. One is about product maturity. And a lot of our audience and our founders are in the very early stages of building a product. And so how do you balance, and you mentioned joining Pocus before you guys even had a product. How do you balance selling the vision, what the product will be, and branding around that vision versus what it is today? I think that's a tension that a lot of our founders feel. And yeah, would love your insights.
Yeah, I think this is really important, and something I've learned to do better over time. I can't say I've always been great at this. As a marketer, we have a natural tendency to like want to oversell and sell ahead. And it can create a really bad experience for your post-sales team, your sales team, when those things don't come to fruition. It puts a lot of pressure on the product team as well. So I think my rule of thumb is that you should never, if you're in a sales-led motion, you should never sell ahead more than 6 months. If you're in a PLG motion, that window is a lot shorter. I think you basically can't sell ahead unless you're maybe you have two separate motions where you've got like a PLG flywheel and then you're also doing more of the enterprise sales, so you can have a little more wiggle room for how you're painting the vision. With that said, I would say there should always be a grand vision that you can paint. That is allowed. But when it comes to how the rubber meets the road, do not promise features in the sales-led world any further than 6 months, and do not promise anything PLG wise just at all, I think. Because for PLG, you know, expectation meets reality in the shortest time span. So you can't set expectations with your customers that your product can do things that it can't, because they'll find out very quickly that it can't. And then I also think about bringing your customers along that journey with you in a sales-led motion. And I think Alexa and Isaac did this amazing in the early days, and we still continue to do that with our customers today, is bringing them along the journey, being very transparent about what exists, what doesn't exist, but being very clear about the vision and then building alongside them towards that vision. In the early days with our design partners, I think, had a lot of success with them because we were focused on building things that they wanted to see, and they felt very bought into Pocus as a result, because they could really see on a week by week basis as we were adding new features that were based on their feedback. And so having that tight feedback loop between customers and your product team and seeing the progress, I think helps you sell ahead without setting the wrong expectations.
I love that. And it's connected to what you were saying earlier about the defining the hero and the villain and, your role in it. And I think if you're clear on, you're solving this problem and you're on the journey of doing that, yeah, your design partners will be patient with you, right? And your customers will be understanding. They're like, we still want to be part of this journey with you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, amazing. Well, Sandy, I have a final question we ask every guest that comes on our Winning Wednesday series, which is really about grit and how you maintain a winning mindset in the face of what's really challenging. Early days GTM, is not for the faint of heart. And just your final piece of advice for our audience. What would you say? What's the secret to maintaining that persevering through the glass, as you've been describing it, in those early days where you're really unsure, but you're fighting for that fame that you're trying to
Yeah.
establish? How do you persevere through that?
That's a great question. And I think it'll be different for everybody based on what motivates you. So I'm motivated by like doing new things, challenging myself. I am a restless person. I always need to be doing things. And so the pursuit of the goal, I really actually do enjoy that journey. So I would say if you're not comfortable with the journey, I would get comfortable with the journey because that's the part of it that you have to enjoy. It's not necessarily always the outcome. It's enjoying the process. And so ways that I like to enjoy, like the reasons why I enjoy the process are I'm learning new things. I'm meeting new people. I'm really energized by connection and meeting people. And so using the opportunity to connect with other folks as part of a journey, like whatever it might be, whether we're trying to get guests on a podcast or organize a, collab with another brand and do a dinner. But just working with great people and meeting great people keeps me energized along that journey. And I think as long as I'm learning, I'm happy. But figuring out what is that like internal motivation is key. And yeah, being comfortable in the uncomfy moments. It can be hard. It's really hard, but I think just yeah, reflecting on reflecting every week, I think is a helpful way to do that too, like
Mhm.
reflecting on what you accomplished every week, reflecting on what you learned every week.
Mhm.
Also checking in with yourself on like how you felt about all of those things. Uh, that's not something that came innate to me, and it's something I've more recently started doing, but I've found that that's helped me, be really comfortable in the uncomfortable and really enjoy the journey just as much as I enjoy the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we just heard another secret to your success is that love of learning, right?
Yeah.
That's part of why you've been able to do this so successfully. So, thank you so much, Sandy. As a last thing, when is the right time for folks to start using Pocus? I know you mentioned the minimum
Yeah.
viable tech stack. You did not mention Pocus in that, but at what inflection point would you say is a startup's the right moment for them
Yeah.
to start using Pocus?
Yeah, so using the full platform, I would say we're best when your go-to-market team is around, I want to say like 15, 20 people. So you need to have, a few sellers or CSMs or AMs or SDRs in order to really get the true value out of Pocus, just based on kind of like what we're built for and how we're priced. We do have some free resources though. So we have a free AI tool where you can go and start building account strategies for free, unlimited. So there are now ways to interact with Pocus even before you're ready for the full platform. And yeah, I'm always happy to chat with folks about Pocus or early stage marketing. So definitely hit me up on LinkedIn.
Sandy, you're incredible. You're a legend. I'm so grateful to have had this time with you and for all your insights. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. Oh, I love the purple hearts. So on brand, you guys.
I love
Um,
that.
thank you for
Thank you so
joining us.
much.
And cheers to winning big in 2025, folks. See you
Yeah,
on the next episode soon.